what happens if I eat 100% of my calories from ultra-processed foods and track all of that. Some of the other really interesting learnings, my visceral adipose fat increased. I went from 0.2 pounds of visceral adipose tissue to 1.12 pounds of visceral adipose tissue. So that's a 5.5x increase in 30 days. The most interesting was I tanked my testosterone 30% in 30 days.
You mentioned the highly ultra-processed diet. What was that experiment and what did that show from a data standpoint?
Yeah, so the idea behind this was what happens if you eat 100% of your calories from ultra-processed foods? Because I typically eat a pretty healthy, whole food, balanced macros, good diet. And I got really into using all these different health trackers last year just so I could understand kind of what is the state of the art as we're building our own app.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had Throne, like an early prototype of Throne back then, but I was also using Whoop and Oura at the same time, and smart scales, and I was doing DEXA scans regularly, and I tried Function, the blood testing company. So the idea was like, first of all, like it was kind of inspired by Super Size Me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but the difference was, there are so many more consumer tools for health tracking available at our disposal today than there were for Morgan Spurlock doing Super Size Me 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we live in kind of the golden age of personal health tracking. It's awesome. And so my idea was, instead of eating McDonald's every single day, and he structured it so that he was eating basically until he was full, right? So like, several thousand more calories than he needed to every single day. Whereas mine was, I'm going to maintain a strict calorie goal of 3,000 calories. And I targeted that so that my weight wouldn't change.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens if I keep my caloric intake the same? My macros are, a little bit all over the board, because I was doing like what I call theme days, right? So like there was one day I ate only Krispy Kreme donuts. There was another day I ate only health halo foods, which are things that are marketed as healthy, but then you start reading the back of the package and it's like clearly not.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea was, what happens if I eat 100% of my calories from ultra-processed foods and track all of that? What happens to all of my different biomarkers that you can track, right? So I did blood tests before and after. I did microbiome tests before and after. I recorded my mood, energy, focus, and stress 3 times a day, every single day on a 7-point Likert scale. I recorded my blood pressure 3 times a day when I was doing that. I wore all these different health trackers tracking my sleep. I wore CGM so I could track my blood glucose. And the outcomes of that were pretty amazing. So the first was, my gut health was way more resilient than I expected it to be. The only days that really threw my gut out of whack were donut day. I didn't poop right for 2 days after that. And then spicy foods day was the closest I've ever come to having an emergency in public. Like that was, truly just those 2 days were awful. But for the most part, I was pretty healthy, gut health wise. The biggest changes that I observed were, the first is my glucose levels didn't impact my mood and energy so much as the change in my glucose. So my glucose was spiking when I was like, in the middle of that uphill journey.
On
I
donut
felt
day,
invincible. What?
On donut day, probably.
Exactly. Yeah. On donut day, like when your blood glucose is like on the rise, you feel amazing, right? Which is like why runners have those like sugar gels to keep them going. But when my glucose was crashing, it like, I was impossible to be around. I hated myself, like it really did it. Like it was dark. Like I just remember like, there was one day I was driving and just like, oh my God, like I had to pull over. It's just like, I was in such a bad mood and like getting dizzy, And so I think that was the other thing is, because I was eating so much trashy food and so much sugar for the course of a month, by the end of it, I was just like very sensitive and grouchy, particularly to my blood glucose. And when I stopped the experiment and started eating healthy again, like the time I spent spiking was cut in half every single, like just immediately. So that the time I spent in the high spike zone. But the crazy part was my average glucose throughout the day was completely unchanged throughout the entire experiment, right? And so one of the things that taught me is like that's the value of continuous health monitoring, because if I had only looked at like my A1C, which is like the trailing indicator of your blood glucose, then I would not have noticed any of these differences. It really was that instantaneous monitoring. It was the ability to see, the levels day to day, minute to minute that were really important for me. And so, I think about the parallels for like what we're doing at Throne, being able to see your digestive patterns and correlate that to your inputs is far more valuable than taking a point in time test, one time or maybe once a year and trying to make inferences based on that. I think some of the other really interesting learnings were how much my sleep was affected by this. And then actually, I forget, the most interesting was I tanked my testosterone 30% in 30 days.
Let me get a couple clarifiers. So
Please.
Did 3,000 calories as a standard.
Yep.
And prior to this, you were following your mixed diet of generally accepted as healthy foods, whole foods, single ingredient, nutrient-dense foods. And you did this experiment maintaining 3,000 calories with nothing but processed foods. How long was the experiment? You said a month?
It was exactly 30 days.
Okay. And in that span, your weight stayed stable?
Yeah, weight stayed stable. Let me pull up the exact numbers here. So my weight kind of went up and down between 186 and 189. So stable.
Pretty stable, yeah. And you're, this is super interesting, man, because I'm all about experimentation. So many people in the evidence-based community are like harping, because I'm a natural bodybuilder, and natural bodybuilding is big advocates, generally speaking, for the flexible dieting if it fits your macros approach. Eat everything you want in moderation. Obviously, prioritize healthy foods, but at the end of the day, it's all about the calorie, and you can totally change your composition based off of that soul manipulation, which is true. But I'm trying to take a deeper approach to like overall health and well-being, obviously. So from a caloric intake standpoint, the fact that your weight held stable, is a feather in their hat, which makes sense. But you're obviously seeing a lot of other markers totally independent of just weight that are very, very valuable.
So I think the most interesting one from this side. So yeah, I did 3,200 calories a day. I continue to exercise, I lift 4 to 5 days a week. I was doing yoga once or twice a week. I averaged about 14,000 steps a day. I'm a big walker. And then the other big key note here is I don't drink. So, that's another big difference between this and Supersize Me, is it kind of came out after the fact that he'd been drinking throughout. I think the most interesting thing that blew my mind was, number one, just the effect on my testosterone was profound. And then number two, my visceral adipose fat increased. Let me make sure I get this number exactly right. So I went from 0.2 pounds of visceral adipose tissue to 1.12 pounds of visceral adipose tissue.
Wow.
So that's a 5.5x increase in 30 days, despite the fact that my overall body fat on the DEXA went from 11.9% to 11.5%. So I lost fat on total. It basically had just sucked all into my visceral fat, which was...
What'd your testosterone do?
My testosterone went from... Let me pull up the exact numbers here. Shoot, I don't have those readily. Give me 2 seconds. Let me log into my blood testing. But it basically dropped my free testosterone dropped 30% and my total testosterone dropped 25%. And I can pull up the exact numbers for you here in just one moment.
And what you're eating during that 30-day span is pretty much what a standard American diet is on a regular basis.
More or less, yeah. That, fast food, packaged foods.
And you're probably eating, honestly, 3,200 calories is probably less than the average individual that's eating out a lot at fast food places. Because in 3,200 calories, I went through a drive-thru today to get some ice. That's about the only thing I get in the drive-thru. And I was looking at the menu, and they've got the calories there. And like a meal is typically 1,700 calories at Sonic, for instance. And you throw like a Slurpee on the side of that. you're at 2,000 plus calories in one meal pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. That was the other thing, is trying to maintain 3,200 calories while eating nutritionally empty foods sucked, right? There was a lot of nights I went to bed hungry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like, what was a typical day of eating? Like, were you just using various popular fast food chains, like all the McDonald's, Burger Kings, Dairy Queens, all that jazz?
Yeah, so for the first, I'd say, week, it was kind of, it wasn't very structured. So it was just whatever was convenient, which I think is like fairly accurate representation of how a lot of people move through life. And then I was live, like, blogging this, so I'd post TikToks about it every single day and post stories on my Instagram. And so then folks suggested the idea of doing theme days, and so then I did about 15 days worth of theme days, and those were, there was like a candy day, there was a dessert day, there was that health halo day, there was a protein bars day, and so those varied between awful and not as awful because, protein bars day is like fine, like I can get through eating protein bars for a day. But candy day is just like, it's moments of like extraordinary amounts of energy, but like
Mm-hmm.
throughout the day, it's mostly crash, right? Um,
And were
okay,
you like if you're doing like candy day, like you're not getting really any protein in on that day, would you like have a day that would involve more protein the following day, or how do you
I
kind of
tried to do
supplement?
that. Yes, just for my own sanity, right? Like if
Yeah.
I tried not to structure like the days that were effectively 100% carbs. I tried not to do two or three of those in a row, um, just because that actually made me nervous. Like you
Yeah.
feel so bad at the end of one of those days. That like the worst day by far was those runner energy gels that I mentioned. I've never tried those before, and one of my friends dared me to do a day that I ate only those energy gels, and that was the only theme day that I gave up on. Just because that was the day I was driving and I had to pull over, and I was like, because I'd eaten, four or five of those, then went on a walk around the lake with a buddy of mine, and we were walking and talking for an hour and a half, and I had to get back in the car and head back to the office, and I got so dizzy that I was like, oh, it's like not safe for me to be driving right now. Like I'm in a bad mood and dizzy, and I pulled into a parking lot, and then I looked up and it wasn't even the parking lot I thought I'd pulled into. Like I was just like fully
Wow.
a block away from where I thought I was. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a breather and go get some Taco Bell, some real food, so to speak.
Man,
And
were you wearing like a CGM during that?
yeah, yeah.
So what was what was the highest you saw your blood sugar, and what was the lowest you saw your blood sugar?
Oh gosh, that was last summer. I don't remember. I do remember that was the most dramatic spike in my blood sugar. I saw my blood sugar fall like 45 points or something around there. Like, okay. I think I spiked it here. Actually, let me see if I can pull up my CGM results. I remember what my averages are. I have my averages here. Don't remember off the top of my head, but I do have them. Give me 2 seconds.
I'm having you pull up testosterone and blood sugar. I'm just
All
having you
right.
bounce all over the place, man.
Yeah. So my average glucose was 94 milligrams per deciliter. And I remember seeing my highest glucose was something like 135. And then I would crash down to, you know, low 80s a couple times.
So nothing too crazy. I mean, my blood sugar will go up to like 130 when I'm working out, and then it'll kind of drop to 70, 80 or so post training. But yeah, just from eating the gels, that's wild, man.
Yeah, but that's kind of what I'm saying is that the absolute numbers matter less than the
Fluctuation and volatility.
exactly than the speed at which your
Yeah.
blood sugar is moving, right? So when it's crashing hard, that's when you have those hypoglycemic moments.
Yeah.
So
What'd you use testosterone do? That one, you get
all
that
right,
one
yeah, I
too?
just pulled that up. So my free testosterone went from, all right, so May 23rd, 2024, my free T was 180.9
Mm-hmm.
and fell to 125.9, which is a decrease of, and that was 125.9 on June 27th. So that is like a month and 3 days apart is when I got those results, and it
Mm-hmm.
crashed 30.4%. And then my total T, give me just one moment. that went from 912 on May 23rd to 691 on June 27. So that's a decrease of 25%.
That's wild, man. Did you get like lipids drawn too?
Yeah. The lipids were shockingly stable. The lipids, let me find those. So which ones do you want to look at?
Just for simplicity, what was your like total cholesterol, LDL, just like the basic lipid panel?
Yeah. Total cholesterol LDL from May 23rd to June 27 went from 122 to 89. So that.
Yeah. What did your trigs do?
Just a moment. So my triglycerides were almost completely stable. Those went from 58 to 57.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This is fascinating, man. Because like a lot of people, like I wouldn't want to do this experiment. I wouldn't want to eat nothing but processed food for a month. So
I will
you're a
never
brave
do this
man.
again.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Did your lean tissue on the last DEXA, did your lean tissue change much?
Let me pull that up. So my lean mass went from 21.4 kilograms per meter squared to 22.1 kilograms per meter squared.
So the layperson hearing this probably, all right, weight stayed stable, lean mass increased. Let's just eat nothing but processed food for a month, and I'm gonna get jacked.
Sure, but also my visceral adipose tissue, like
Significantly increased.
significantly increased, and it took me another probably 9 months to get back down to my ranges where that's the other learning here, right? Is like you can screw yourself up pretty quickly, but
It
getting
takes a
back
while to get recovered.
exactly.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Savage Clip. If you want to see the full blown deep dive, check out the full episode here, and I'll see you there.